Good day, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Seven, live from Jerusalem with Rabbi Aaron David Poston, who's been sharing with us the profound series, The 48 Ways to Wisdom. And today we got a doozy. We're on part 46. We're really making ground. It's been a long journey, and I am just so thankful that the rabbi takes the time out of his very busy schedule to share this course with us and stay the course to the end. And I'm thankful. So let's jump right in. Rabbi Poston, you're live on the air. We're going to turn it over to you since it's your class. We appreciate you sharing Torah with us.
Shalom Aleichem, Dan. Shalom Aleichem to everybody. Shavua Tov. For those who are already out of Shabbos, I hope you all have a great week. And for those watching now, wherever you are, and for those who are watching later, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Today we are on number 46, and the title is, in Hebrew, Lo Imed al Manat Lilamed, which means actually learning in order to teach. Now, should that be a prerequisite? Should, right? These are the 48 ways to wisdom. Many of the ideas were covered over the last 45 previous episodes. We spoke about many of these ideas. They're all fundamental. Right? Life is a learning experience. Life is a journey. I mean, if you're not learning, you're not living life, right? So, okay. So why should you learn in order to teach, right? So learning is an experience. Teaching sounds a little bit more like, okay, I have to give something over. So if it's wisdom that you are seeking and your eyes are being, opened up to things that are worthwhile value, which that's what we'll call wisdom, then why would you not want to share this with others?
Right, exactly. 100%.
So I don't even know where to start. I got so much stuff to cover, but I really wanted to start with the Rambam's definition of the mitzvah to learn Torah, okay? He alone, right? He always brings a verse from the Torah that supports his thesis that this is one of the 613 mitzvahs. So we all know, everyone should know by now, that learning Torah is a mitzvah for a Jew, okay? And the truth is, even for a non-Jew, they should know what it is that they have to do in life. So they also have to learn Torah. Now, the pasuk, the verse, we find in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 7, which is in the Shema, right, that we say several times a day.
Would you like me to read it, Rabbi?
Please.
And you shall teach them to your sons and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk on the way and when you lie down and when you rise up.
Now, interesting. The mitzvah to what? To learn Torah. And I'm saying this because it's not really the mitzvah to learn Torah. The Rambam actually says it's a mitzvah to learn and to teach. But we all think it just means to learn. And where do you learn it from? V'shinantam livanecha. And you shall teach. The literal words of, in other words, the verse for learning Torah is from teaching. And we spoke about this before. A prerequisite to be able to teach is to learn. And that's why these words to teach is actually the proof text that you have to learn. Now, the way the Rambam actually phrases the mitzvah is to learn and to teach. So for those who are just sitting and learning, which, I think you must do at some point, for good reason, because before you can teach, you're going to have to learn something. Question is, how much? How much should you learn before you start teaching? That's going to be part of the question we're going to talk about tonight. Rav Noach Weinberg, of course, we know this series he made popular. I mean, it's part of the mission in Pirkei Avot. So this wisdom goes way back. These 48 ways for the Bnei Yisrael, for the Jewish people when they left Egypt, in order to reach that level of receiving the Torah. So we went through journeys, we went through the desert, and we went through these we'll call character developments. So for those who are not familiar and are just watching for the first time, they have to understand that these 48 ways are really all not just character development, but a strategy to gain wisdom in order to acquire wisdom. So again, we're going to have to talk about how is it, and I think we've discussed these ideas already, how is it that learning in order to teach is a part of acquiring wisdom? And we talked about this before. I'm going to try to stop saying that because everything I'm going to say tonight we've heard before. When you are preparing to teach something, there's no question you're going to pay a lot more attention to it, right? A couple examples he gives. The first example the Rosh Yeshiva gives in his book. Imagine you're taking a course in university, and maybe it's quite boring. Maybe you're paying attention. Maybe you're not paying so much attention. But all of a sudden, some, I don't know if it's the editor of a major newspaper comes to you and says, we want you to give a synopsis of the class or of the series of classes you're getting in the university. So now's your opportunity, right? You're 15 minutes of fame. What are you going to do? Well, now you're going to start paying attention because you need to give it over, even if it's a abridged version, right? You're going to pay attention with such fervor and gusto. You're no longer going to be daydreaming. You're not going to be twiddling your thumb. You're not going to be checking your phone. You're going to pay attention to every single word, right? Because who knows? 2 million people.
You don't want to miss the mark. Yeah.
2 million people are going to be listening to you or reading the words that you write. So the idea that you will acquire much more wisdom when you feel that you have to give it over, meaning it'll be so clear to you, or you should try to make it clear to yourself. So we understand that when you're obligated to give it over, you're going to be much more wiser because of it. Now, what I want to do is just read. This is from the Metifta and Pirkei Avot. I want to use this as maybe an outline to discuss the idea here. So I will translate as I go along. It's always good to learn a little Hebrew. It's quite easy. Halomed al menat lilamed. To learn in order to teach. He says it's a chovah. It's an obligation. Mutelet ala adam. It's actually it's an obligation that's placed on every man. Shelo yistapek bekach she'oisechu betor liatzmo. That one should. It's an obligation on every place, on everybody. They should involve themselves so much in Torah, not just for themselves. Not just for themselves. Ella, rather, yishtadel lelamda la'acherim. But rather, one should make every effort to teach others. Shemiteva adam hashalem, that the nature of we'll call it a perfected individual, someone who's trying to reach perfection. Lehishtadel l'saye biyad acherim shiagiu, that he should make every effort to assist, to help others to reach this point, meaning you feel that you have reached a certain level of, let's say, I'm not going to call it spiritual perfection, but a certain place on your journey towards spiritual perfection. Mm-hmm. So you want to help others reach that level too, whatever level you're on. Afheim lo machuz hashlemut, meaning even those who are not yet there, if you're there, wherever that destination, you're not at the final destination, but whatever location you're at on your journey, you want others to reach that destination as well. So in the comments, he mentions in Midrash Shmuel, which again, that's a great book to have. The Midrash Shmuel on Pirkei Avot is specifically on this chapter, chapter 6, Mishnah 6, that deals with the 48 ways. He brings down, he adds an idea that what the rabbis have said already in Baba Kama at 92b. Now, this is a very interesting idea that everyone should realize this principle. The principle is, Kol hamavakesh rachamim al chavero. Anybody who prays for mercy for a person, in other words, if they're sick or they need success, and you're praying for them, tzarich la'oto davar, and you need the same assistance from heaven that you're praying for the other person, drum roll please, this is like fantastic, that you will be answered first. Now, it means you have the same need, whether it's a refuah, whether it's a healing, whether it's success in a certain area of your life, you need it, but you're going and praying for that other person that they should get it, you will be answered first. How we're going to see, what does this have to do with learning? In order to teach, Well, we'll see. Al Kain, therefore, Adam haloimed almenat lamed lacherim. Therefore, the person who's learning in order to teach others, nena techila, he's actually going to be answered first. Melamdim oto min hashamayim. That what is going to happen is that you will be assisted, or let's say taught from heaven. In other words, you will have some divine experience. I mean, who doesn't want a divine experience, right? So just imagine you want to tell the truth over. This is part of the transmission, right? The Jewish people have this great tradition, right, all the way back from Moses, of making sure that there's a transmission of this holy information. So you're inserting yourself to a certain extent into that transmission process, and therefore you're getting help all the way back to the Sinaitic experience, which all Gentiles as well, right? Even though they said no, while the Jewish people said yes, right? When God offered the Torah. So as a nation, the Jewish people said yes. When it came to the non-Jews, there were unique, special, I just love them all, unique individuals that said yes. But that was in their soul, but not in their bodies. And now that they're in this world, listening to this right now, they can be part of that transmission, meaning teach over the Torah that you hear from the rabbis that are part of that transmission, and you can enter into part of that transmission.
Wow.
Now, and here's the kicker, Ushari HaTorah niftachin befanav. So not only is the person getting divine assistance, right? They're becoming part of that transmission, but the gates of Torah are going to be open to them. So by you teaching over what you heard from Rashi, from the Rambam, from the other rabbis that you're hearing on YouTube or wherever it is, open up an art scroll, right? And he also adds another idea, Sha'af b'derech tevi'it kachu, that even though the way of nature is this way, Shameachar b'choizer mishanin as divrei Torah lacherim, that the way it is that as you, I guess, review, you're repeating, right? You're also learning it on a more sharper level when you're able to teach this Torah over to others. You're zoicher es talmudoi u'mischayim biyado. You're able to remember, to recall, which is very important. But it's also internalizing it, right? Making it real. That's what it's really about, right? It's not just
acquiring it. Yeah,
it's right. It's not just repeating it for repeating's sake, but it's all about internalizing the wisdom and making our lives better. But the truth is, when we talk about the Jewish people, we know that we're called a mamlechet kohanim, a goy kadosh, a holy nation. And again, by those non-Jews attaching themselves to the Jewish people, so they're in service. In fact, the word kohanim, right, the fact that the Jews are called kohanim, what is the root? What is a kohen? A kohen is a servant. He's serving. And in a certain level, a certain way, I want to describe righteous Gentiles who have accepted the Torah from heaven, meaning from the Sinaitic revelation. Okay, so you know that there's a mission. You just know that the Jews have a mission. And that mission is to live up to what the Torah says and to be the teachers. And when I say serving them, achas v'shalom, God forbid, I'm not talking about being what's the word, like a slave. We're talking about service, the joy in serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by serving, and I mean serving, like shimush, like assisting in every way possible the Jews in their mission is a great zchut. It's a great merit for a non-Jew. I mean, if I was a non-Jew, that's where I would want to be. You know what I mean?
Amen. Okay.
So basically, keep in mind, right? We're talking about learning in order to teach. So we spoke about this before, and I said I wouldn't say that, but that there is no such thing as stagnation in spirituality. If you're a spiritual person And where do we learn this lesson from? The angels that went up and down the ladder in Jacob's dream. Why does it say they went up first? I mean, usually, you think the angels are in heaven,
They
okay?
come down first.
The,
Yeah.
the angels are in heaven. They should be coming down first. But it says they went up first. Why do they go up first? These are really, energy that we create, right? The angels are things that we create through our actions. I mean, okay, obviously Hashem created them, but there's this idea that we are spiritual beings, and we do create. We'll call them angels for the sake of the discussion. And therefore, what you're doing, what the actions that you do, and this is a very big thing in Judaism, right? We believe, and I think I've been talking to my students for the longest time. We should have a bumper sticker: all deeds matter. All deeds matter, right? And that's true, right? So if all deeds matter, this is what's going to make or break. It's going to make the world a better place.
Oh,
So
for sure.
keeping that in mind, if you know your purpose in this life is not just tikkun midot, right? The Vilna Gaon says the purpose of life is, I'll just translate that as perfection or working and fixing your character, right? That is where all the reward really is going to come from, right? So doing that, but what's the purpose? It's to make the world a better place, right? Something the Jewish people have always been interested in doing is leaving this world a better place for our children than we entered or that we had the opportunity ourselves, right? Because we have this idea of, as it says in the Isaiah law, right? That when Mashiach comes,
Rectifying it. Yeah.
what's going to be? It's going to be that we have, no more war. Nations won't be teaching war anymore, right? That all the GDP, all the, trillions of dollars that go into armaments will instead be used for, research and development in medical endeavors and in education and feeding the poor. I mean, stopping, horrible pollution issues, whatever it is. Okay, so keeping that in mind.
Beautiful.
So when you're learning, you're learning for all of us, right? It is true. We say that when just a Jew is sitting in a corner, he's keeping the world going. That's true. There is going to be an aspect of that, but there's also a hashpa'ah, an infiltration of the spiritual, the spirituality into the world, and it's going out. I just want to stop and mention about this week's Parsha we just read, last will. This is Saturday night, so we read this past Shabbos, Parsha's Bo. So the Jews are told the men and women are going to go to their neighbors. Now, we know the neighbors are Egyptians, okay? So they're going to go to their neighbors and ask for the gold and the silver vessels in order to leave Egypt with the great wealth that Hashem promised Abraham. Your children will be subjugated and oppressed for 400 years. But Achrei Cain, afterwards, they're going to go out with great wealth. Okay. So this is all part of the redemption process. It needs to happen. But why is the word re'ehu being used? Throughout the Torah, re'ehu, like v'hatarecha chamocha, re'echa, re'ehu is referring to a Jew. Normally, it's really referring to a Jew, or at least, right, in many cases, even like a Ger Toshav. Again, we don't have that status yet, but that's Rat Hashem very soon in our days. So the idea is that someone who is like you in Torah and mitzvahs, someone who's trying to be righteous, who's trying to do the right thing. Well, the Egyptians were not. So how does the Torah get away using that term when all throughout the Torah, Re'ehu does not infer a non-Jew, especially, someone as evil as the oppressing nation as Egypt. Okay, so the Vilna Gaon explains a very important idea. He says it's because, now you have to follow the train of thought, the Torah used the word re'ehu, not referring to the Egyptians per se, but referring to the hashpa'ah, the heavenly influence that the Jewish people did to each other. Meaning they were so kind, there was so much chesed, so much kindness, so much love between each other that had an influence on the Egyptian. Therefore, when the Torah says, we're going to ask, and not only did we ask, not only did they give us, they gave us twice the amount that we asked for. If we said, give us 5 pounds of gold, they gave us 10 pounds of gold. It was against our will because we were about to tread into the desert carrying a big burden. But it says in the Torah, 3 times that they had favor. There was favor in their eyes, and they gave us. Why did they have favor in their eyes? Why did they give us? They were like our enemies. Because the Jews treated each other with such love and respect and concern that had a hashpa'ah, an influence that filtered down, that trickled down into the non-Jewish population. And that's why they gave over. And it was not against their will, according to the machlokas, but this is the one opinion that it was against the Jewish people's will that they gave us the stuff. That's why God had to plead to Moses, please ask them. And that's why Moses had to plead, please, when you go, and he's telling the Jewish people, go and ask them, because they were injured. You were in jail for, 210 years or 86 years, whatever it was. You were in prison, like hard labor. And you say, listen, we're going to let you go. Okay, you're basically free at this moment, midnight. But if you just hang out a little bit longer, we're going to give you a lot of money. Most people would say, I'm out of here. Keep your money, right?
Time's time, yeah.
So it was against the Jewish people's will. And not only that, when we asked them, they gave us twice as much. But just to imagine, try to understand the word re'ehu is being used when it's never used, especially against our enemy, as your friend, because that's really what re'ehu means, your friend. And it's not because the Egyptians were your friend, but because you had such an influence on your surroundings because of what you did for yourself. So try to imagine, this is what the Jewish people's job really is. Are we living up to it or not? Okay, that's is our goal. Our goal is to live up to it, okay? We can be critical all we want.
It's in play.
All right. So basically, when you're sitting and learning, you're not learning for yourself. The Rosh Yeshiva said, if you sit and learn, you're just sitting and learning, and you are learning in order that one day you will give it over. You know what I mean? Your kavanah, your intent. I want to get clarity because one day I'm going to be in teaching. I'm going to be sitting on the bus and someone's going to ask me a question. I'm going to have my own children who are going to ask me these questions. Or better yet, we're going to even talk about most people don't even know what to ask. So in a certain sense, I'm not saying being a missionary or proselytizing, but you want to go out and share wisdom with people who don't even yet know how to ask. We're going to get to that point as well. But you want to ask yourself, bottom line is, as you're learning, how can I communicate this wisdom? How can I articulate this idea? How am I supposed to transmit this idea to another human being? This is what you should be thinking about while you're learning. Especially, we're talking about wisdom. If you're learning something it's full of wisdom, you must think, how am I going to articulate this? He does bring down, you should focus on 3 particular things. Again, we spoke about these ideas, but it doesn't matter. Always define your terms, right? Because most people, you say one word, they think you're talking about something else. You want to be as precise in the terms that you're talking about. The next question you really should ask yourself is, do I really understand this? Am I sure I understand it? Because if you're not sure, you got to
don't want to muddy any waters. Yeah, you want to give clarification for sure.
And then the third thing you should ask yourself is, how am I to articulate this? How can I describe this? And again, you got to realize that if you're talking to one person, you may have to change some of the vocabulary. You're talking to a geek who knows all about computers. You may have to use some examples that he can relate to. You talk to someone who's very involved in sports, you may have to articulate whatever it is you're trying to get through in different terms. Or a businessman, you can use business terms, right? Contracts and board meetings and whatever it is to get across a certain idea. And that's why we call it the oral Torah, by the way. Okay, one second. I'm just going through. I just want to go back to the idea if you want to read Isaiah 42, verse 6, that would be great.
Let me just pull it up, Rabbi. Isaiah 42,
Verse 6, correct.
verse 6 reads, I am the Lord, I called you with righteousness, and I will strengthen your hand. And I formed you, and I made you for a people's covenant, for a light to nations. Huge.
Okay, so again, we're talking about the whole world. If you're not a Jew, you may not be a prime player in being a light to the nations, but you are, or could be, the backup, the reserves, the supporting staff, right? And of course, for those who already know me, I mean, know anything about Judaism, there is such a thing as conversion. We don't encourage it. In fact, if you come to us, we may even push you off a little bit, you know. But for those that are really gung-ho and nothing's going to stop them, there is such a thing. So it doesn't mean you cannot ever be part of that. But even if you're not on that track, again, being a part of the support staff, right, is, you know, you have a candle, the
Huge.
light itself, but you also have the candelabra. You have the fixture that it's in. You know what I mean? There's so much that plays a part in the Jewish mission, as I mentioned already, that you could be part of the supporting staff, as they say. Okay, and we have an obligation. This is what it means, or legoyim, to, as we talk about tikkun olam, to fix the world. But we want to make a lasting impact on the world. We want to get to the core problems, the root of the problems. We don't want to just
Band-aid solution. You want, yeah.
We don't want to just fix the symptoms.
Change the scenario. Yes. Impact.
I'll just read here. Therefore, the way to effect real change is by teaching and sharing Jewish values and wisdom. So you don't have to be Jewish to do that, which gives people the clarity and understanding they need to live meaningful and productive lives. So I'm assuming if you're already watching this channel and you're involved with the Noachide World Center or Nativ or any of the other programs that do such a wonderful job in sharing Jewish values, because that's really what it is. Yeah. So that you know the wisdom and you know that how important it is. I'll just read again another thing he mentions. This is the meaning of the Jewish vision of tikkun olam, fixing the world. We must learn Torah, and we have an equal obligation to share what we know. We must reach out and educate our brothers and sisters, and we have to get the Jewish people to understand their mission, right? Their mission is Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And I know a lot of Bnei Noach who have, I'm not going to say, how do I say it?
They're righteous. Some are.
Persuaded Jews to be more observant, right? You get an opportunity, you have someone who you work with, maybe even a client, maybe even a boss, you know, you say, you know, I know these people in Israel, they're keeping Shabbos. I know you haven't been in Israel for a long time, right? You hardly visit. But, you know, this is something that was cherished by
I find here in the West, if they have any history of observance in their family and they know you're a B'nai Noach, all of a sudden they're on their, best behavior. The eyes are open. All of a sudden they're concerned about their conduct in being that real deal.
Yeah, and I just want to add, especially, because there's missionaries, Christian missionaries, and then these people are very vulnerable to missionize, being missionized. So I think that as a counter anchor, right? I remember as a non-religious Jew, I was not always religious, and I had Christians tell me how special it was to be Jewish. And I never heard that from even Jews. Right? Can you imagine a Ben Noach, a righteous Gentile, going up to a Jew and telling him how special it is?
Yeah.
That's right. And if only they could do a little bit more to be involved in their community, to support Torah, to learn a little but really it's through sharing wisdom, right? Because it's not about telling somebody else what to do. It's hopefully being an example of what it means to be a decent human being, being righteous, and sharing
Real
wisdom
deal.
in a non-coercive way, in a way that's encouraging them to learn more. Right? And you can share wisdom. When you share that Jewish wisdom and say, see what you guys have done to change the world, right? So we're proud of you. Keep it up. So maybe the person would go back
Thank you for
and
the encouragement.
learn. Yeah. Now, another idea is you don't have to be perfect to teach Torah, right? So this is something that I shared this before. I'll tell you the story. So I had a little bit of Christian missionary in my behavior before I became religious Jew. I was always Jewish, but I was dabbling with Christianity. And I found certain things that were very inspiring in Christianity, so I was sharing that with other people, let's just say. I don't want to go off on too much of my sins. So I really needed to learn a lot about Judaism. So when I went to yeshiva for the first time as a young adult, I was in my very early 20s, I felt very, not humiliated, very humbled, and realized I knew really nothing about Judaism, and I needed to learn. But at the same time, I was in yeshiva, and I was going out at night to Jews for Jesus to try to save my Jewish brethren, right? I was concerned about their souls, and I was going to the Harvey Kirshners. You know what Harvey Kirshner is? It's a slang for that.
Harry Krishna, yeah.
Harvey Kirshner. Yeah, because most of these people high up in the organizations are all Jews. Anyway, so I was sitting in the Beit Midrash with my highlighter and my New Testament, and this big rabbi, unbelievable, he came over to me and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm preparing myself to go out to this J for J thing, and I'm going to try to persuade my brethren to come back to the fold." So he said, "You know what?" And I have to tell you the background to this conversation. He says, if you, as a newcomer, you missed all of your, what do you call it, education. If you just spend, he said 10 years. If you spend 10 years solidly learning Judaism, you're going to be much more effective than you're just learning all this, John, Luke, and Mark, and Acts, and all this stuff, whatever to say back to these people. And we had a long conversation, and I actually made a commitment, and the truth is I did it. I actually spent 10 years without really going to outreach. But Rav Noach Weinberg was very much into, if you know something, you got to share it. So, to the point, you have,
it's too hot to handle. You gotta, you can't hold it to yourself.
The Iron Curtain, right? Jews didn't even know the Aleph Bet, and Jews, if you knew Aleph, and the other one knew Bet, so you sit down and you teach each other. It's so important. So what I did was I mainly stayed within the domain, in the walls of the yeshiva, and I battled out with all my rabbis and with all my chavrusos, and I became like a big brother to many people. Truth is, I was involved in outreach, but within the yeshiva. I sat by the front door. My job was to sit by the front door, and anybody they brought in, they actually had me have a conversation, discussion. Can you imagine Esha Torah? So Rabbi Meir Schuster or Jeff Seidel, when they would bring people from the Kotel for the first time, they would sit and I would have a schmooze with them. But I was inside, I call it a safe compound to a certain extent. Why am I telling you this? In the end, I think he was right. Now, I wanted to give you the background. He happened to, this rabbi, it's Chaim Foyer, Rabbi Foyer, Avram Chaim Foyer. He has written for Art Scroll so many books. I think all the Tehillim were written by him, right? So it was just after he had finished the whole thing of Tehillim. I think it was Rabbi Twersky. Yes, no. Actually, it was the head of the Art Scroll. He said, "What should I work on next?" He says, "You know what? After all the work you've done, take 10 years off, and then come back and start writing again." So it was now that night that he walked by me in the yeshiva. He happened to be the rabbi of a shul in the neighborhood, and he told me when I reminded him of the story, he says, I don't go there every night. It was just that one time that I was there that you were doing this, that I gave you that advice because someone had just given me that advice earlier that day. It was like amazing. So anyway, I took that advice. But when you're starting off, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. You don't have the confidence. So in the beginning, teach what you know. You don't have to go and
Stay in
be
your
on
lane.
capacities. Just exactly stay in your lane. Teach what you do know. And who do you teach it to? Your chavrusa. Teach it to when you're sitting at lunch, the yeshiva. Here, not everyone's going to be sitting in the yeshiva lunchroom, right? Teach it to your sister. Teach it to your brother. Teach it to your parents. Teach it to your kids. Teach it. Teach it. It's going to help you to review, to solidify. But again, you have to ask your questions beforehand. Do I really know how to articulate this idea? Have I bought into myself? Have I asked all the questions that I need to ask?
Get it? Yeah.
Right. So there's going to be this balance of humility. Going out and teaching, I'm not going to say go for it. I'm going to say teach what you know. Don't become like some radical teacher. Oh my God, I'm not going to teach everything. Only teach what you know and know that you have to know more, right? What do we say all the time? That the more you know you don't know, right? The clear card says the goal of acquiring wisdom is to know you don't know anything, okay? So it's really strange dichotomy. I mean, the more you know, how can you teach? Because you're only going to teach that which you know. And if you only teach that what you know, then you know it. So what's the problem?
Yeah. And, we appreciate everything you're doing. You've been all I can say is I enjoy Rabbi Breitowitz's. You can tell when he's sharing something, how clear sometimes the phraseology comes out in respect. And I find it's just honed and sharpened, and it's got to be useful for sure to reach its target.
Listen, he's a brilliant person. If he's listening to this, my apologies. He is extremely brilliant. You know that he is a professor of law. I mean, not just a professor. I mean, he's really high up there. I can't even use these Latin words for what he has accomplished, okay? But he was like number one in one of the top law schools. And to become a professor of law, and I have to tell you also, I mean, I got notes. I mean, I keep lots of notes. I don't think he's ever brought notes to a single class. And whenever he quotes a verse from the verse, you're not really supposed to quote verses from memory. It's not just suggested. It's whatever. Let's just say it's highly suggested. You always have a chumash. You're supposed to look at them, not read them by memory. I notice where his eyes, right? He doesn't have anything in front of him on the desk except the note that I told him to read in the beginning. Okay, so he's got no chumash, no notes, and whenever he reads a verse, meaning in his head, his eyes always turn to a certain angle. It's as if he's reading it right from his heart. He's like reading it. Wow. Unbelievable. And that's just the verses of the Torah, let alone the information of the Rishonim and Achronim and the different disputes and the details. It's just unbelievable. So one of the ideas is trying to find your own niche, right? Mm-hmm. Because you do need to find your own, like, what you're good at, what you like. If it's philosophy or if it's history. I'm talking about within the frame of Judaism, or if it's counter-terrorism, counter-missionary.
You could call it terrorism, I guess.
Or it's, whatever, halacha, and this kind of halacha as opposed to that kind of halacha, right? Become an expert, but don't expect overnight. You decide what. So
specialize, you're encouraging
it's a repertoire, right? Whatever you feel you're very good at, what you actually enjoy, and you can develop that.
Mine it like a vein of gold.
He says here, become a specialist. Identify an area that you've learned in depth and try to perfect it. Take your material and develop it into a class you can teach. But you also have to constantly update, expand, and improve your repertoire. Keep your ideas fresh. If you're excited about the material, your audience will be also. Right? There's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't get to. Going back to this idea that if you pray for somebody else who needs what you need, but you're not praying for them, you're not praying for yourself, you're praying for them, and then you pray for yourself, your prayers would be answered first because you're being altruistic, you're being selfless, you're getting rid of the ego, all those things that hinder your spiritual propulsion, right? It's going to the wait, it's going to the side, and it's allowing you to really connect to Hashem, and Hashem's going to grant you first. So there's a Gemara, I think this here is in Baba Kama 98, 92a. It says like this. So the Gemara cites a series of questions that Rava asked Rabbi Bar Mari, the first thing being related to the previous topic of discussion. So I don't know if I'm going to, let me just read this one. So Rava said to Rabbi Bar Mari, from where do we know this, that the sages say? Okay, this is the famous statement of the sages. But the Gemara wants to know, where do we know it? So we heard it. It's been our tradition that when someone prays for someone else, their prayer will be answered first. How do we know this? So the statement is, anyone who asks for compassion from heaven on behalf of another, and he actually requires the same compassion from heaven, right? His prayers would be answered first, meaning he'll get a response, positive response. So Rabbi Bar Mari said to him, the source is from here. So this is it's actually in Job 42:10, and you got to keep in mind, right? Job is not Jewish, right? So it's amazing. Whatever we learn in Job, a lot of this applies. These are like universal ideas for Jews and non-Jews alike. It says in 42:10, if you want to read it.
I'm pulling it up, Rabbi. Job 42, verse 10 says, now the Lord returned Job's captivity when he prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before.
Right. So I have a different translation here. And the Lord changed the fortune of Job when he prayed for his friends. So by Job praying for his friends, Job was answered as well. Okay. In fact, he was answered first. Rava said to him, you said the proof from there. That's a verse in the writings. Now, in other words, what the Gemara likes to do is always bring in the earliest source. If it's a good source, bring it in from Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, whatever it is. Bring it in from the 5 books. Why are you bringing me a verse from Job? Rabbi.
Job written?
It doesn't matter. No, it wasn't written earlier. I mean, in the Torah itself, the 5 books is what we received at Mount Sinai, and the rest, whenever we received it. I mean, you're saying the situation or Job's life was simultaneous with Moshe. That I got. Okay. There's an opinion that he never even existed. It's all made up. I'm not saying in the negative sense. I'm saying it's a metaphor.
Story of encouragement. Yeah.
Okay. It's a metaphor that Moshe wrote based on a fictitious figure. Okay. But let's put that aside. Okay. In terms of it being written, it was written after the 5 books of Moses. In terms of Job's life, it could have been simultaneous with Moshe. But anyway, maybe you know something I don't know.
Well, doesn't it mention like where he came from? I think in the beginning of the book, and I think some rabbis have extrapolated that these were all linked in early Genesis, descendants, and.
Like I said, we're not talking about when he lived. We're in agreement, right? He could have lived before Moses, during Moses. But I'm talking about when we're looking for a source, we always want to find a source in the 5 books of Moses before something from the prophets. We're always looking for something in the prophets before the time of the writings. There's an order, okay? So in the Gemara itself, if you have an earlier source, we want to hear it. So this rabbi basically comes back to the other rabbi and says, why are you giving me a source from Job? Why I have a source here for the same point. In other words, there's no contention about the point. The point is that if you pray for others, you will be answered first. Remember, this all relates to the idea of you learning in order to teach. You'll have this min hashamayim, you'll have this exalted assistance from God, right? As if you're part of that transmission. So it says in Genesis chapter 20, verse 17. You want to read that?
Just pulling it up. Chapter 20, verse 17 reads, And Abram prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his handmaids, and they gave birth.
Now, read Genesis 21, verse 1.
Go next chapter. And the Lord remembered Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had spoken.
Now, what this rabbi is trying to explain is that when Abraham went ahead and prayed for Avimelech to be healed and his wife and his maidservants, and what happened right away? They bore children. Then what happens right away for Abraham? He bore children, right? We saw Abraham couldn't have children, and all of a sudden now he can have children. Is it related to the, well, I'm not talking about Abraham, I'm talking Sarah, Abraham and Sarah together. So you see, this rabbi is bringing in an earlier source,
right?
That when you pray for others, you will end up being answered as well. Okay, and that was the point there.
Thank you.
There's another point in Genesis chapter 30. Now, it's a lot of verses. I don't want you to read them. I want to summarize the idea, and that is Genesis chapter 30, really verse 9 until maybe 20, 21. I don't have them all in front of me, but basically Leah had stopped bearing children, right? And she took her maidservant Silpah. So by giving her maidservant Silpah to Yaakov, it's true, she did want children, and she thought maybe she wasn't going to have any more, but Silpah then had several, right? But ultimately, God did hearken to Leah, and she even conceived more. She conceived a fifth son and eventually a sixth son. So there was this idea of thinking you're stopping, not having any more children. She gives over. Again, it's not the same as teaching Torah, but it is in terms of being altruistic, in terms of assisting others, and then you will receive a similar response, a similar, we'll call it a prize.
So could it be said, "Give and it shall be given to you"?
I never heard those words exactly, but
it's a Christian phrase. That's
okay. But look, we spoke about the Vilna Gaon's expression on the word re'ehu, that if you do what's right, that will have an influence on others. So I don't know. Maybe that's the same thing. I want to go to in Gemara Ta'anit. In Gemara Ta'anit, this is an expression we've spoke about before, right? They asked the rabbis, "Who do you learn the most from?" Oh, do you learn from your own rabbis? You would expect that to be the answer. No. What about your own colleagues? The people who are on the same level as you? No, that's not the answer. Who do you learn the most from? So Rabbi Hanina said, it's true, I've learned much from my teachers. I even learned more from my friends. But most of all, from my own students, I've learned the most. Okay, so this is... if you're teaching if you're learning in order to teach, don't forget about the teaching part. If you're interested in learning, which means to gain the wisdom, to gather the sparks of wisdom, how could you be missing out if you're not involved in teaching? Because you're going to learn the most from your students. Okay? In Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 5. Now, I'll read it because not every Mishnah comes out the same. But anyway, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, would say, one who learns Torah in order to teach is given the opportunity to learn and to teach.
Wow.
One who learns in order to do is given the opportunity to learn, teach, and observe and do. So keep this in mind. If you're only learning without any thought of others, you're missing out. You're totally missing out.
Yeah, bring your A game in everything you do, folks.
I'm just looking to see if I missed anything. Pretty much covered it all. I have a whole thing here in the back of my notes. I think we covered pretty much all of that.
Well, I think the worst case scenario, if you learn in order to teach, is you're going to definitely amp up your learning, for sure.
Yeah. I do want to I don't have the Gemara in front of me, but I'll try to remember it. There's this idea of matzah. Matzah means to find. So, talking about unique times, special times. So, if somebody is not married, they should pray to Hashem that they should find a good wife. Okay, and if you don't find that good wife, it could be worse than death. Right? We know this, right? For all of us married guys, right? Okay, and for all the women out there, it's the same thing for men. Okay, so you want to find a good wife, you want to find a good partner. So that's something you should pray for. You really have to pray. I mean, obviously, you have to do hishtadlut. You have to go to the matchmaker or whatever people do these days to find the match. But this is something you have to pray for. You have to pray for Torah. You want to, right? Praying. We talk about praying is not just to sit and pray. You have to also, everything you're praying for. You want to pray for a good job. You have to still put in, your papers for the, to the employment, the HR department, whatever it's called. You have to send in the faxes to answer the calls. So, what else do you have to pray for? Pray for a good death. In other words, a peaceful end. Praying for a good burial place. So, and the last thing one should pray for, it's a very funny thing, but to pray that you should be near a bathroom at all times, right? Because back in the day, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. And anyway, I wanted to bring this in because praying for Torah, don't just assume you're so smart, right? You can be reading the same thing over and over again and miss the whole point. Oh, yeah. There's some spiritual, spark, a lesson that is so rich that it's not just going to help you, but if you could draw that kernel out, you could change the world. You can change other people's lives, right? An example he always gives, if you see somebody, God forbid, bleeding on the street, you're not going to stop and help them. The truth is a lot of people are bleeding and they don't even know it, and they don't even want your help, right? Because they don't know. So the way, if you really care about others, they're missing the mark, right? They're they're living their lives without God. And if you can develop a way that is, I'm going to use the word entertaining, but I'll call you edutainment, right? Full of wisdom and education, but in an entertaining way, right? Unfortunately, I mean, this is a world full of media, mass media. Everybody's a comedian and everyone's a star, right? No, but if you can figure out a way that's engaging, right? Ask questions. Why do you feel that? Get the other person to think, because they're not ready to ask for help. But if you can put them in a corner where they realize, what, maybe I don't know, maybe, and if you have some insight, you can at least send them in the right direction. I mean, that's, they ask, what is a rabbi these days? Does a rabbi have to know everything? No rabbi's going to know everything. I shouldn't say that.
Be prepared for scenarios.
98% of the people that are called rabbis, they don't know everything. But if you know where to find the answer, that you can already be called a rabbi. So same thing. What's a rabbi? A teacher. So it's part of the humility factor, right? If you don't know the answer, it's okay, and you should say you don't know. But you've watched this video by this rabbi, and I think he addresses your question when they ask. I can't really articulate it yet, right? I wish I could, and now I'll put more attention into it. But at least my suggestion, my advice is to spend 15 minutes. It'll change your life. Listen to this rabbi, right? That's again, knowing where to go for the answers is big. It's huge. Okay, so I think what time? Yeah. Well, anybody? You have any questions or anything come up on the questions for?
Nobody's asking any specific questions. It's actually flowing pretty good. Chat room. No questions on Facebook or on YouTube. A lot of positive comments, Rabbi. I mean, let's face it. I think what you're touching on today really can help people achieve their full potential and move into their their purpose for being. I think a lot of people, if you just take this to heart and you learn in order to teach, you're going to learn at a higher level. You're going to acquire whatever you're listening to. You're going to become a better student, but more than that, a student for a purpose. And life becomes more fulfilling at that stage for sure. More accountable also. So keep that in mind as well. And keep the Yiras Shamayim in front of you at all times. So, yeah, I've seen some people that are just too bold and brazen and then overreach and overstretch themselves. I'm probably guilty of doing it occasionally, but the heart is like you say, Rabbi. If you do it in order, Hashem opens the opportunity. I think you read in, and I'm just overjoyed to actually be able to broadcast these classes. I know that this series, the 48 Ways of Wisdom, if you acquired each and every one, go back, check every one of them out. There's that nugget of truth in just the statement in the title of the lesson that is deep, that you can unfurl and integrate. But then if you're doing it with the right attitude, doors may open up for you to share with others, and all that will make the world a better place. So I think, you don't put that, light bulbs go up in the roof, and so it lights a whole room. And I think that this is what we all, as B'nai Noach, should be helping the rabbis do. Shine that light, and it's great. Thank you so much, Rabbi. So, as you mentioned last week, we're definitely not on for 47 next week because you've got some big things going on there in Jerusalem, correct?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of preparation for our Tu B'Shvat Seder, which is the following day. So B'ezrat Hashem will take on 47 the following week.
A couple weeks from today. So you heard it right from the Rabbi, folks. So tentatively, we will be back in 2 weeks with Beyond the Seven, part 47. And we're coming right down to the wire with this beautiful series. And I'm just so grateful that you've taken the time out. I've got more notes on this series, Rabbi, than I have for any other series of late, and I will find myself flipping, even daily. Oh, where was that? I saw that 6 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and I'm like, there it is. One verse or one statement or one reference, and it's just a joy. So thank you, and thanks again for staying up so late in Israel to share the light of Torah with us. And so we'll see you in about 2 weeks, and we hope that you have a wonderful Tu B'Shvat next week. And
Great.
So, folks, we'll catch you 2 weeks from today. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.